Speaking of governments doing stupid things, the North Carolina government has proposed legislation to end unfair competition in the automotive industry. Now, you know when government says unfair competition, they really mean people who compete with our cronies, right? Yeah. In this case, it's Tesla Motors, which is pretty much the only car company in America that sells directly to consumers. When the Tesla Model S started out selling similar cars from Mercedes, BMW, and Audi, the North Carolina Senate Commerce Committee decided enough was enough. If their proposal were to be passed into law, it would prohibit automakers from selling cars directly to consumers in North Carolina. And wouldn't you know it, the driving force behind the bill is the North Carolina Automobile Dealers Association, middlemen who want you to buy cars from them instead of bypassing them and getting them straight from the company. The bill's sponsor is Senator Tom Apodaca. And would you look at that? He got $8,000 in campaign contributions from that very same dealers association last year. Wow, what a coincidence. This isn't the first time a state has acted against Tesla. In Texas, employees at Tesla's showrooms aren't allowed to sell cars, allow test drives, or even say how much it costs. But North Carolina's law would go even further and expressly prohibit North Carolinians from buying the car online. People, can the cronyism get any more obvious? What's it going to take for people to finally realize that politicians do not have their best interests at heart? And moreover, that they can only do this because of things such as campaign finance laws that make it so that only incumbents and their cronies can play this little game, with challengers constantly being shut out. It shouldn't even matter whether or not Apodaca is a political crony or a well-meaning politician. Government shouldn't even have the power to say what we can and cannot purchase. And if we could limit the government to only its legitimate functions, then no amount of campaign donations from the Dealers Association or anyone else could ever make a politician try something like this. Because government wouldn't even have the power to do it in the first place. It isn't corporate money that corrupts government. It's corrupt government that brings the corporate money into the scenario to begin with. And the sooner we learn that lesson, the better. And now it's time to spin right round, baby, right round, this week's biggest Bogon emitter. Back in May, we covered the efforts by the North Carolina State Legislature to ban sales of electric cars manufactured by Tesla Motors because they don't use car dealers to sell them. Now, several other states have joined in, and there's an interesting pattern emerging. Tesla's Model S is getting unprecedented attention for both electric and standard gasoline-powered cars. It was the first electric car to win Motor Trend's Car of the Year. Consumer Reports gave it a higher rating than it's given any car in history, 99 out of 100, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has rated it as the safest car ever. By all indications, the Model S is said to be an unprecedented success among fully electric cars. But there's a problem, and it has nothing to do with the car itself. You see, Tesla feels that the standard dealership model wouldn't work for their car, mostly because of people's preconceptions about electric cars. According to Tesla CEO Elon Musk, quote, "We actually train people to educate. We always wanted to be a really low-key kind of friendly environment, where we're not constantly trying to close deals. It takes them at least twice as much effort to sell someone an electric car and to educate them as to why an electric car is good. And so if we were to go through the traditional dealer path, the result would be a disaster." What's the matter with that? As we reported earlier, politicians don't like it. Texas has already banned sales of the Tesla, and there's anti-Tesla legislation being debated in North Carolina, Colorado, and Virginia. And why? Listen to the apologetics from Bill Walters, president of the Texas Automobile Dealers Association. Quote, "This happens all the time. Someone wants an exception to the franchise laws. If we made an exception for everybody that showed up in the legislature, before long, the integrity of the entire franchise system is in peril." Hey, you know what? Maybe that would be a good thing. This franchise system is nothing more than doublespeak for corporate fascism. If you want to do business in this state selling cars, you have to go through the people the mob bosses say you can. But you know what's interesting about this? In every case, Republicans are behind the legislation. Okay, Democrats are too, but at least Democrats don't pretend to be in favor of free markets and against government interference in business. Oh, wait, but they do claim to be for the environment. and the Tesla would improve the environment when charged with electricity generated from nuclear and other non-polluting power plants. Okay, you've convinced me. They're both horrible. Amazing how often that turns out to be the case. Why would I ever want to join the Democratic Party that sells out the environment every chance it gets whenever it's not to the benefit of their corporate cronies, while hypocritically accusing Republicans of doing the same? And above all, why would anyone join the Republican Party if they're for small government and the free market? When has the Republican Party ever done anything for the free market? Like Democrats, it's all just rhetoric to cover up their anti-freedom and anti-market legislation that benefits no one but their corporate cronies. And if recent events are anything to go by, they are not interested in changing this anytime in the foreseeable future. Which is why all of these state lawmakers from both parties just have to be this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now let's anti-disestablish this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. And this week, blame the first nominated Ben Taronff of The Guardian for publishing an article entitled, "America has become so anti-innovation, it's economic suicide."
Yeah, I was reading that article and it was so stupid. I mean, I know we're going to talk about it later, but like his whole argument is, oh, I found a product that was scamming me. That proves America sucks.
Yeah, one company, Juicero. It's a device where you can put in a packet of diced fruits and vegetables, and the machine squeezes it and gets juice from it. Turns out, you can do the same thing just by squeezing the packet, and in fact, that way's actually faster.
Yeah, and apparently the machine costs $400, and a lot of people are saying, well, this is a scam. It's like, well, okay, yeah, there's a lot of products on the market that are scams, but why do we need the government to stop products like that? All you gotta do is tell people don't buy the product on social media.
I wouldn't even call it a scam. I would just say it doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
But I mean, it does what it's advertised to do.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? Well, according to Taronff, quote, "It also reflects a deeply unfunny truth about Silicon Valley and our economy more broadly. Juicero is not, as its apologists at Vox claim, an anomaly in an otherwise innovative investment climate. On the contrary, it's yet another example of how profoundly anti-innovation America has become."
Oh, yeah, and how's that NHS working for you?
Innovation drives economic growth. It boosts productivity, making it possible to create more wealth with less labor. When economies don't innovate, the result is stagnation, inequality, and the whole horizon of hopelessness that has come to define the lives of most working people today. Juicero isn't just an entertaining bit of Silicon Valley stupidity, it's the sign of a country committing economic suicide.
Oh, yeah, that's easy for you to say when your own country denied a toddler the right to have this experimental genome therapy, which would have saved his life.
Well, actually, this reporter's from San Francisco. He's just posting it on The Guardian, which is a British newspaper, but...
Oh, okay. But still, you know, America has a lot of faults, but we are still innovating, you know. The day when a nation is committing innovation and economic suicide is not when we see bogus products like this hit the market. It's when we have people like you telling the government we need to get involved in all this, and the government says, okay, we're going to prevent this, so we're going to pass all these rules so no one's allowed to innovate because why bother?
Check this out, quote, "Entrepreneurs typically make terrible innovators. Left to its own devices, the private sector is far more likely to impede technological progress than to advance it."
Oh, sorry, I have to laugh at that. This guy clearly does not understand history.
That's because real innovation is very expensive to produce. It involves pouring extravagant sums of money into research projects that may fail, or at the very least may never yield a commercially viable product. In other words, it requires a lot of risk, something that, myth-making aside, capitalist firms have little appetite for.
Buddy, you gotta sit down and read a history book, because here's the thing. 90% of all the stuff we do was invented by entrepreneurs. And don't give me that whole bullcrap, well, the government invented the internet or we went into outer space. Here's another thing that they don't tell you. Almost all of the equipment the astronauts were using in the space program were invented by private companies.
You know what? I think I'm going to dig up Blame the First's article he wrote with this on Medium.com, because he actually goes into the internet thing, which we've talked about before. I don't have it in my notes, but he does a good debunking of that. Conventional wisdom says that market forces foster innovation. In fact, it's the government's insulation from market forces that has historically made it such a successful innovator. It doesn't have to compete, and it's not at the mercy of investors demanding a share of its profits.
That's actually why the government is so bad, is because it has no competition. Listen here, buddy. The way reality works is that the reason why companies are always coming up with new technological innovations is because if they don't, another guy will come around, invent something better, and they're going to get left behind. The government, on the other hand, doesn't go out of business, so they could care less if a new technological advances comes up. Hell, there's actually been proof that a lot of our computers for the Defense Department, they're still those old 90s modems.
Now, if you're wondering where this guy is getting his economic data from, well, he doesn't have any. I'm linking to a graphic I made years earlier for a video where I do a scatter plot. The innovation index is on one axis, and the economic freedom score is on another. It is absolutely correlated with free markets with an R-squared of 0.47. This idea that markets don't innovate but government does is just so laughably wrong, it's embarrassing for both Taronff and The Guardian.
I actually once met a statist and all that who said, but look at Australia. Australia is more economic prosperous, and yet they have all these laws and all that. It's pretty funny because I looked it up, and yeah, they are above the United States, but they're still below other countries that don't have those laws. In fact, I remember seeing an update, and shortly after Australia passed all those economic laws, its position actually went down.
I think they're like number 5 now or something, and they were number 3.
Yeah, and seriously, this guy has no data? Who made him a freaking journalist?
Journalists don't need data. What do you think they're doing?
Yeah.
No, it's government that gets in the way of innovation. And a good example of that is Elon Musk. I mean, he's just an absolute refutation of everything this guy's saying, pouring all sorts of money into reusable rockets, solar roofs that work a lot better than the ones the government has funded.
Yep.
Electric cars, again, better than the ones government has funded.
Mm-hmm.
And a revolutionary high-speed train that can travel faster than an airplane by going through a very low-pressure tube while being more energy efficient, and even an underground car tunnel to potentially alleviate traffic jams.
Oh, but Shane, we can't fund the Hyperloop because Thunderfoot says it's dangerous.
Yeah. But I mean, if anything, government is hampering all of this, like the Hyperloop and the car tunnel. There are all these burdensome regulations and bureaucracy, things like, land acquisition and things like that. In all probability, India will get a Hyperloop before the U.S.
Yep.
And like we talked about, the sale of Tesla cars, Tesla wants to sell cars directly to the consumer. Government keeps getting in the way of that.
But Shane, we gotta protect the people. How are you protecting people by denying them access to goods or services that could make their lives a heck of a lot easier, and in the case of medical innovation, could possibly save their life?
Well, that's true of the Tesla, too. The driverless features of the car make it a lot safer.
Yeah, and how come a guy who has stage 4 terminal brain cancer, can't try out this experimental treatment that might prolong his life, even possibly save him?
So if America is anti-innovation, it's because of government bureaucracy, not the free market.
Yeah.
But let's go back to that innovation index I mentioned. America currently ranks number 4, behind the UK, Sweden, and Switzerland, and ahead of many other countries like Finland, Denmark, Netherlands, and Canada. We may not be number 1, but only a moron could say we're anti-innovation.
Yeah. Perfectly good example is India. Here's the thing, there's really smart Indians. In fact, some of the biggest tech companies were founded by Indians, but they were founded in America. A lot of people like to think that, well, America's richer than us because we have more smart people or whatnot. Well, then how come all these people who are smart in their native homelands, they have to come to America or Switzerland to get their ideas off the ground?
That's always how it worked. Look at history. Look at how many inventors came here from somewhere else.
Yeah, and going back to World War II, one of the reasons why Germany didn't have access to all their powerful super weapons was because everyone was coming to America, including some famous scientists, because they were Jewish.
Yep, the brain drain.
Yep.
So that's why Ben Taronff takes this week's Extraordinaire. And now it's time to urbanize this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it goes to mediocre software developer Dan O'Dowd for yet more fraudulent video lying about the safety of the beta version of Tesla's full self-driving, which aired during the Super Bowl. He also posted it in a Twitter post where he said, quote, Watch the Dawn Project's Super Bowl ad demonstrate critical safety defects in Tesla's full self-driving. He mentions his previous video, which was proven fraudulent by several Tesla YouTubers, who then had their videos taken down by O'Dowd using a false DMCA claim. Quote, "6 months ago, we reported FSD would run down a child. Tesla hasn't even fixed that." Outright lie! There was nothing to fix. Tesla's FSD easily stops for children and other pedestrians. Quote, "To focus their attention, NHTSA Gov must turn off FSD until Tesla fixes all safety defects." Twitter's community context posted corrections with links saying, quote, "Dan O'Dowd owns a competing software company writing self-driving software. Dan's previous attempt to show FSD will run down a child was debunked. Another user performed a test, and it worked as expected. Tesla's FSD has over 55 million miles driven without any reported injuries." The new video shows a Tesla hitting a dummy of a child, a stroller, and other supposed safety problems. What they all lacked was cockpit data showing FSD was active. He shows a Tesla running down a dummy child in a school crosswalk, but there's no indication the car was operated by anything other than a human being. Tesla YouTubers show over and over again that FSD beta does no such thing. He then claims the Tesla swerves into oncoming traffic. This is classic priming, when someone tells you what you're supposed to see before you see it. We covered this long ago with crap like electronic voice phenomena, where they always tell you what the mysterious voice is going to say before it says it. Without priming, it's just an indistinguishable mess, but priming lets you think it's more clear than it is. As per O'Dowd's normal, the video is 720p instead of the 4K you'd expect from any Super Bowl ad, but the interior footage is even lower res, with tons of compression artifacts and none of the text even remotely readable. The blue line showing the path the car is mapped out, which Tesla people call the noodle, shows no swerving. That's where FSD would go if it were active, but the driving icon at the top appears to be gray, not blue, indicating that FSD isn't active. The only driving function active is cruise control. Going around a curve to the right, the car approaches a BMW in the opposing lane, which then encroaches over the double yellow line, as so many drivers annoyingly do. Brickbats to all of them. So the driver panics a bit and jerks the wheel. As it does so, the driving icon disappears, meaning that cruise control is deactivated. And even if I'm wrong and the driving icon is blue and the crappy resolution was just masking the color, that would mean that FSD was on but turned off as soon as he jerked the wheel. This is by design. The human driver can take over in an instant. Oh, and by the way, he cut off the bottom of the screen so we couldn't see any warning messages. The driver did the swerving, and he swerved away from oncoming traffic. But with the priming and the fast editing, it's deliberately set up to mislead you into thinking otherwise. The stroller hit is also just an external shot with no cockpit data shown. Next, the Tesla passes a stopped school bus. There is a warning, but we don't see what it is. Again, the resolution is too crappy to read it, and the driving icon looks gray to me since it doesn't match the blue of the noodle. So FSD isn't even active. But either way, the driver is in control at all times, so they should have hit the brakes if the car didn't. So they just admitted to breaking the law. He then shows the car going through do not enter signs. The icon is gray, meaning you just have cruise control on, not full self-driving. Just like with the next clip where it drives on the wrong side of the road, FSD is not active. And like all the clips, at least the ones that weren't cut off at the bottom, a warning message appears in the lower left, exactly where it would appear if the user overrode what the car was going to do. The message is way too low resolution to read, but the message appears to have the yellow triangle of the warning that tells you you're moving out of your lane. O'Dowd claimed the message was supercharging unavailable. Hugo Souza pointed out that you see that message when someone's messed around with the software. O'Dowd replied, "You know nothing. You can't even read the message on the screen." Of course not, because you posted it at such a crappy resolution. Let's see the 4K video, Dan. Of the criticisms, he made the age-old cry of the woo. Shell! Quote, nearly all of the deniers below have a huge conflict of interest. They are Tesla shareholders, desperately trying to cover up grotesque safety defects in Tesla full self-driving just to line their own pockets. But as the community context said, quote, tweet author presents unverified claims as factual. Tweet author does not and cannot possess knowledge regarding respondents' Tesla ownership. Dan O'Dowd is founder and CEO of Green Hills Software. Green Hills Software produces competing automotive projects. One of the main critics was Holmar's Catalog, who replied, Dan O'Dowd is a pathological liar who is organizing a smear campaign against Tesla because he is the CEO of Green Hills Software and they are getting killed by Tesla. Our real-world tests prove FSD Beta does respond to children, helping to prevent crashes and save their lives. O'Dowd claims that his software, quote, never fails and can't be hacked. We know exactly what to make of those claims, don't we? Remember Steve Ballmer bombing up and down the stage, having missed his calling as a professional wrestler, screeching that Windows XP was the most secure operating system ever? Green Hills Software is being used in the mind-blowingly expensive boondoggle, the F-35. Holmar's Catalog showed a video from Doug Dunbar of the F-35 messing up a simple automatic landing, something routinely done in commercial jets, so there's no excuse. The pilot has to eject, and from the testimony of several users, ejecting that close to the ground is a disastrous situation. To them and many other critics, he copy-pasted the same reply, quote, you have no knowledge of our role in the F-35. If you did, I would sue your ass off for violating the NDA. Everything you are saying is pure fabrication. There have been no public failures of our software in the F-35. Funny thing, he didn't actually deny it. As for the Teslas, this does not match both the testimony of Tesla drivers and the direct evidence shown in videos by Tesla YouTubers. They do not swerve into oncoming lanes. They do not hit children. They're very cautious about pedestrians that even thinks might be getting into the road, and if anything, the complaints of Tesla owners is that it's too cautious and can make it difficult to get through college campuses and other high pedestrian areas. When, of course, full self-driving is actually active, which you can easily tell because the icon turns blue. In any of these cases, O'Dowd could release the full resolution footage and the footage from all of the Tesla cams and the computer data as well. Once again, he steadfastly refuses to do so. I guess he has to do something though, because a few more failures from his software that never fails and can't be hacked could mean his company's in trouble. Unlike Tesla, despite this video playing during the Super Bowl and getting millions of views on social media, Tesla stocks didn't even seem to notice. As of this podcast prep, Tesla stock is well over 200 after beginning at 189.87 at Monday morning's opening. Kinda makes you wonder what we could find out about O'Dowd if he couldn't hide behind an NDA and threaten his employees for breaking it. So all of that makes Dan O'Dowd this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now let's particularize this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. And it's another from the news media who just can't seem to help screeching horrendously false panic-mongering, especially when it's about something owned by Elon Musk. Tesla just pushed out an update that makes it harder for drivers to misuse the auto steer function. Let's be clear, this is not full self-driving or autopilot. It's equivalent to what other car companies call lane assist. It's like a fancy cruise control that keeps you in your lane and at a certain following distance from the car ahead of you. It is not intended to be something that takes driver attention away from the road. The driver is still supposed to be, well, driving. It'll give you both audio alerts and flash the screen if it detects your hand is not on the wheel, and a camera in the cabin checks your face to make sure you're looking at the road. Apparently, NHTSA felt there were too many issues with idiots not doing this. In their notice, they posted, In certain circumstances, when auto steer is engaged and the driver does not maintain responsibility for vehicle operation and is unprepared to intervene as necessary or fails to recognize when auto steer is canceled or not engaged, there may be an increased risk of a crash. Wait a minute. You're saying that a car might crash if the driver isn't paying attention? Gee, NHTSA, thanks for letting us know that. We would never have figured that out without our wonderful government regulators. So Tesla pushed down a software update, which NHTSA confusingly calls a recall, to add more controls and alerts to make sure the driver is paying appropriate attention. And they'll even disable the feature if they figure out you've been misusing it. So the news media took this as an opportunity to go absolutely ape over it. Here are just a few of the clickbait fear-mongering headlines. NBC News. Tesla issues massive recall of more than 2 million vehicles over autopilot safety concerns. Bloomberg. Tesla recall threatens its defense in autopilot crash lawsuits. Forbes. Over 2 million Tesla models recalled over autopilot safety defect. Note the biggest problem with those three. This has nothing to do with autopilot, only auto steer, and there's not a safety concern with it. The safety concern is with the human operator. You know, the ID10T component. UPI. Tesla recalls more than 2 million vehicles over risk of auto steer crashes. No, UPI, auto steer wouldn't be crashing. The driver would. And keeping their apparently coveted position at the bottom of the heap, Kotaku. Tesla recalls millions of cars to patch mode that could kill you. Interesting that no one was freaking out about cruise control when it came out. Of course, drivers need to keep being alert. They're still in control of the car. It's never been the case that automakers have had to be responsible for inattentive drivers. But this is the news media of today, folks. So all of that makes the news media this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. And now it's time to desulfurate this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it goes to Judge Kathleen McCormick, who is making us consider a never do business in Delaware department. She voided out in an instant the deal that made Elon Musk tens of billions and Tesla hundreds of billions. Buckle up, folks. This is going to be a long one. Well, there's a lot of backstory we have to catch up on. In 2018, the Tesla board of directors and Musk set out a very ambitious set of goals and milestones and market cap targets sustained over a period of time. It was really unlike any such package in history, made to avoid pitfalls of other deals, such as the CEO pumping the stock, taking a bonus, and then the stock crashes. Just listen to what CNBC had to say about the details of the plan at the time.
Elon Musk telling me he's now agreed to stay on as CEO of Tesla for the next decade. There had been a lot of speculation that he'd be stepping down in the next 2 or 3 years. He had said that once the completion of the Model S, or the Model 3 rather, was up and running, that he might not stay at the company, at least as the CEO. But Tesla now announcing a radical new compensation plan. It could be perhaps the most radical compensation plan in history. Musk's compensation is going to be tied directly to the company's performance. The executive will receive no guaranteed compensation of any kind at all. He gets no salary, cash bonus, equity. He only gets equity that vests over time, but only if he reaches these hurdle rates, which are, dare I say, crazy. So right now the company's worth $59 billion. Mm-hmm. They run at $50 billion increments. So if he gets the company to $100 billion...
Well, you're just talking market capitalization, not based on revenue, not based on the number of production.
There's going to be 2 metrics at each step. So the first step is he has to get the company to $100 billion and reach these operational and adjusted EBITDA and revenue number. If he doesn't get either of them, he gets nothing. At each $50 billion number, he collects 1% of the company. If somehow, magically, he would get the company to $650 billion, which is literally what the plan calls for, if you can believe this, he would collect the equivalent of about $55 billion in compensation. Otherwise, he gets absolutely nothing.
Okay, what if you get it to $650 billion and then it immediately collapses to $500 billion? Is it just hitting that market capitalization milestone that matters? Or is it keeping it there for a certain time? Is it hitting it on a certain
So here's where it
day?
gets even more interesting. The shares vest but then he has to hold the shares for 5 years at each break point.
You still get it, right? Even if market capitalization is the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
No. You can't. It's impossible to game because even if you were to get the company in the market cap to $100 billion, you then have to, by the way, hit the operational numbers.
On top of it.
You have to get both, and then you have to hold the shares for 5 years.
I mean, it's
weird. If you were trying to do something temporary to try and get
the stock price up,
you can't because 5 years later your shares will be worthless.
It would affect decisions on buybacks and issuing stock and floats and all kinds of.
I've never heard of another company tying.
Nobody's ever done it. But he literally gets nothing. And the other thing that's interesting is if he gets to, let's say, $99 billion, he gets nothing. If you get to the next one, if you get to $149 billion, you get nothing. If you get but it is truly eat what you kill, skin in the game.
A sustained $50 billion market cap increase is insane. Very few CEOs could do it even once, let alone 12 times. But miraculously, Musk met every single one of those goals. And by the way, this ambitious package, which basically put all the risk on Musk and none on Tesla, was approved by 73% of the stockholders. In essence, the court has demanded that Musk should have worked for Tesla for the last 6 years for free because he took no paycheck. These stock options were his only compensation. And yet, Tesla was sued by an anonymous person who bought 1 share of stock. That anonymous plaintiff, according to the judge, quote, claims that Tesla Incorporated's directors breached their fiduciary duties by awarding Elon Musk a performance-based equity compensation plan, the largest potential compensation opportunity ever observed in public markets, by multiple orders of magnitude, 250 times larger than the contemporaneous median peer compensation plan, and over 33 times larger than the plan's closest comparison, which was Musk's prior compensation plan. This post-trial decision enters judgment for the plaintiff, finding that the compensation plan is subject to review under the entire fairness standard. The defendants bore the burden of proving that the compensation plan was fair, and they failed to meet their burden. At a high level, the 6% for $600 billion argument has a lot of appeal, but that appeal quickly fades when one remembers that Musk owned 21.9% of Tesla when the board approved his compensation plan. This ownership stake gave him every incentive to push Tesla to levels of transformative growth. Yeah, that was the whole idea! At the end of 2018, Tesla's stock price was around $20. As of this podcast prep, it's trading around $190. Tesla stockholders have massively benefited from this arrangement. She even says it outright, revealing her bias and her preconceived conclusion. Quote, this decision dares to boldly go where no man has gone before, or at least where no Delaware court has tread. The collection of features characterizing Musk's relationship with Tesla and its directors gave him enormous influence over Tesla. In addition to his 21.9% equity stake, Musk was the paradigmatic superstar CEO who held some of the most influential corporate positions, CEO, chair, and founder, enjoyed thick ties with the directors tasked with negotiating on behalf of Tesla, and dominated the process that led to board approval of his compensation plan. By the way, Musk wasn't a founder. She's just ranting. The excuse she used was, the board withheld the nature of the relationships he had with other board members, such as, I kid you not, the fact that Kimball Musk is his brother. He also allegedly didn't reveal his 15-year friendship with venture capitalist Ira Ehrenpreis and a 20-year-old business relationship with Antonio Gracias. How did these relationships come to light? Everyone already knew about them! So she's punishing Musk for not disclosing things that were already public knowledge. She rants on like a conspiracy theorist for a while, and then says, quote, given the collection of people tasked with negotiating on Tesla's behalf, it is unsurprising that there was no meaningful negotiation over any of the terms of the plan. No, there was no meaningful negotiation because it was a sweetheart deal for Tesla. Quote, in the final analysis, Musk launched a self-driving process recalibrating the speed and direction along the way as he saw fit. The process arrived at an unfair price. And she, not the stockholders, is going to determine what's fair. Her ruling pushed Tesla stocks down some 3%. Musk said in an X post, quote, "Never incorporate your company in the state of Delaware." And in another, quote, "Change your state of incorporation out of Delaware before they lock the doors. They are currently blocking John Malone from changing incorporation from Delaware to Nevada." He ran an X poll asking, should Tesla change its state of incorporation to Texas, home of its physical headquarters? Over 87% of the respondents voted yes. In response, Musk posted, quote, "Tesla will move immediately to hold a shareholder vote to transfer state of incorporation to Texas." It is unbearably ridiculous that the court not only took this seriously enough to even let it in the door, but actually gave the person an enormous win. And all that does is contribute to the declining respect and confidence that people are having in our court system. The news media has been quoting Amit Batish at executive pay research firm Equilar, who estimated in 2022 that Musk's package was 6 times larger than the combined pay of the 200 highest paid executives in 2021. But how many of them brought a company from a market cap of $50 billion up to over $1 trillion? So a lot of this really pointed to Judge McCormick having a bias and even being corrupt. Enlightening information came from Kanekoa the Great, who runs Kanekoa News on Substack. He revealed on X that this is the same judge who ruled against him in the Twitter decision. And before she became head of the Delaware Chancery Court, she worked at the law firm Young Conway, who for decades were major donors to Joe Biden. They also hosted Hunter Biden's gubernatorial campaign event for John Carney in 2016, with then VP Biden as guest speaker. After Carney became governor, he nominated McCormick to the Chancery Court. In March of 2018, Hunter Biden threatened legal action against his Chinese business partners, saying, quote, "I will bring suit in the Chancery Court in Delaware, which, as you know, is my home state, and I am privileged to have worked with and know every judge on the Chancery Court." After Musk purchased Twitter, Joe Biden called for a federal investigation into Musk. Afterwards, the DOJ, the SEC, and the FTC all initiated legal actions against Tesla, SpaceX, and X. All of that means that the judge should have recused herself instantly and unprompted, as judges often do when they have such a connection to a case, to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. We don't know if there was any actual collusion here, but the fact that it even looks possible, let alone probable, demands recusation. So this all seems to be part of Biden's weaponization of the justice system against his political opponents. You cannot say that this decision is good for Tesla stockholders because the stock price went down as a result of it. And you can't even say it's good for Delaware. It's terrible for the state. So many companies incorporate in Delaware because the laws have always been very business friendly. In fact, over 66% of the Fortune 500 are incorporated in Delaware. This decision puts all of that in jeopardy. So all of that makes Judge Kathleen McCormick this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now it's time to excommunicate this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And it's a joint one this week for both the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the news media for, once again, completely deceptive and idiotic fear-mongering. NHTSA is continuing to pick on Tesla. As we saw last week, the Biden administration has been directly acting against them with many different agencies. NHTSA has been no exception. Back in December, we gave an example of this. NHTSA ordering a recall that was really an over-the-air software update because they didn't think the car was bugging drivers enough, warning them to pay attention to the road. And of course, the news media en masse published headlines of a massive recall of over 2 million Teslas, the biggest ever, involving autopilot crashes and autopilot safety defect, and even the mode that could kill you. Now, it's deja vu all over again, involving autopilot crashes and warning light issues, as NHTSA issues another recall of Tesla in the form of an over-the-air software update most of them had already received before the notice was even sent out. The problem? NHTSA said the font size on their interior display was 5% too small. Here's what I want to know. If government can issue recalls of Teslas for minor crap like this, can they start to issue recalls of Windows and cell phones when they have severe security vulnerabilities? Just looking for consistency. And speaking of consistency, no other automaker got such a recall. But it's not because they didn't have this problem. FHY Booster on X posted links to times when GM, Hyundai, Kia, Ford, and Porsche had this exact same problem with just as many, if not more, vehicles, but didn't have to fix them because they filed an inconsequential non-compliance petition with NHTSA. That means that, instead of fixing it, they petitioned NHTSA and said they shouldn't have to fix it because it would be so expensive to do for such a small problem. And yet, there were no news headlines reading, Ford refuses to fix major safety issue with warning lights or anything like that. But Tesla can do over-the-air software updates, so they were able to do this quickly and easily. They actually fixed this very minor safety issue to each and every one of their cars literally overnight. And that allowed outlets like the Wall Street Journal to publish headlines like, Tesla recalls millions of vehicles amid probe of autopilot crashes. But if you read their own story, quote, NHTSA said the issue was identified last month as part of a routine compliance check. Nothing to do with crashes, nothing whatsoever to do with autopilot, no complaints, no issues, no nothing, just bureaucrats being bureaucrats. And nowhere in their article do they mention that this fix has been delivered via a routine over-the-air software update. Tesla owners didn't even have to take any action. Even before the stories hit, the update had been pushed out in version 2023.44.30.13. CBS News wrote, Tesla recalls 2.2 million cars, nearly all its vehicles in the U.S. Yes, because they can update all the cars in the U.S., whereas all the cars from Ford, Kia, and the others remain unfixed to this day. Not that this issue is anything to worry about to begin with. The Guardian. Tesla recalls almost all its vehicles sold in the U.S. over warning light problems. Makes it sound like major things like brake lights, huh? No. And it just goes on and on and on. Just like with all the minor software updates, they always go on about how it's the biggest recall to date, with an even bigger number of cars recalled, because Tesla pushes out the updates to all its cars and they keep selling. So yes, that number's going to be bigger every time. Not that they point that out. They have their marching orders from Biden. Gotta take down Elon any way they can. Electrek made a blog post showing the differences in the graphics, and it's even worse than you might think. This isn't just bureaucrats screeching about font sizes. They had to replace the standard circle in parentheses alerts with a bang for brake, ABS for the anti-lock brake systems, and P for park with the larger words brake, ABS, and park. The icons that Tesla had to replace with English text were standard international icons for these alerts. They're universally recognized and understood. Icons you could just glance at and understand, even if you see them out of focus. And now, you have to read and interpret them. Bad for millions of people for whom English isn't their first language. They actually made it more confusing, and it takes more time to look at the indicator to figure out what it means. Electrek wrote, We really need a new word other than safety recall for those, because media like the Wall Street Journal are really abusing them. It's starting to have no meaning now, and we'll take the more serious ones less seriously. Not to mention the fact that they required Tesla to kill trees to send millions of paper letters to Tesla owners about a software update they'll already have received. Sawyer Merritt of Twin Birch tweet-exed, "The fact that increasing the font size of some warning icons by 5% is considered a recall is so dumb. It just results in misleading headlines like this and convinces some of the public that Teslas have tons of safety issues because they don't bother to read past the headline. 99% of Tesla's recalls in the US in 2023 were just over-the-air fixes. Tesla's physical recalls affected just 21,455 vehicles, or about 1% of the total. And that's a problem, because a vehicle that can have bugs fixed remotely and automatically represents an enormous safety benefit. Not even just inconsequential stuff like this. We're talking about problems Tesla noticed in their own crash tests and updated people's software to prevent unprompted. Other car companies simply don't fix these issues. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Scaring people into not buying a car that can be so easily fixed makes people less safe. But once again, we see that the media long ago stopped being about informing the reader, if it ever really was, and has become more about attacking people they see as bad, getting revenge on people who have challenged their favorite politicians and companies, and giving cover to the people who butter their bread. Telling people that something that is safer is more dangerous isn't just lying, it's putting lives at risk. The only way this could be any worse is if the news media ignored major problems from other car manufacturers. Oh, wait, they do! Just 3 months ago, NHTSA made Ford and Lincoln recall over 125,000 vehicles because of risk of fire due to engine failure. That's a bit more serious than a tiny font. Also in December, Ford and Lincoln had to recall 45,000 cars on top of 250,000 previously recalled back in 2020 because the doors could open while driving. How does that even happen? Back in July, Ford had to recall almost 900,000 F-150s because a wiring issue with the parking brake could cause it to engage while the car is being driven. A major safety issue that could cause accidents and cost lives. Not good enough for you? Check this one out. Back in September, Kia and Hyundai had to recall 3.3 million vehicles and had to inform their owners to park their cars outside away from homes and other structures because the cars could catch fire even when they were parked and turned off. Let's see, 2.2 million Teslas fixing a font issue that arguably shouldn't have been fixed at all versus 3.3 million cars that could spontaneously combust when turned off. Which one do you think is the bigger recall? Which one do you think is the bigger safety issue? You clearly can't trust the news media to give you good information here, so please go to the website of your car's manufacturer and find the place where you can put in your vehicle's VIN and see if there are any recalls on it you need to have fixed, because for most automakers, that's the only way you'll find out. Meanwhile, let's see how many dozens of other recalls NHTSA can make on Teslas over the next few months for complete non-issues like this and the autopilot nag and forcing their full self-driving to make ridiculously long stops at stop signs. And we'll also see what Biden and his cronies throw at Elon next. So all of that makes NHTSA and the news media this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now it's time to fanaticize this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it goes to the Wall Street Journal because we said we'd look at other cases where the government or the news media went after an Elon Musk venture. In this case, Tesla again. It may become like cops behaving badly stories. They happen so often we don't cover them unless it's an extreme example. These anti-Tesla stories may well be becoming that common. And that's just what we were looking out for. In this case, the fear-mongering is Tesla worker killed in fiery crash may be first full self-driving fatality. It is absolutely disgusting when they use a tragedy to push an agenda, and they're doing that here. Hans von Ohain had Eric Rossiter and his Tesla on their way to play golf. Now, remember all the times we discussed the news media using things like passive voice or an inanimate object as the subject of the sentence? The Journal wrote that the accident happened, quote, when von Ohain's Tesla suddenly swerved off Upper Bear Creek Road. In this case, they mean it quite literally, quote, the car's driver assistance software, full self-driving, was struggling to navigate the mountain curves, forcing von Ohain repeatedly to yank it back on course. According to the story, quote, the Tesla Model 3 barreled into a tree and exploded in flames, which is weird because they don't have any gasoline, and even gasoline cars don't explode. We've certainly seen far worse Tesla crashes with no flames whatsoever. In fact, when you actually look at the police report, it was actually the lithium battery cells that caught fire. They cannot explode, and they don't make any bigger fire than ICE cars, if that. Just ask any firefighter how insane vehicle fires can get. The aftermath can look worse, as it does in the photo accompanying this story, if firefighters don't respond early, because the batteries can burn for a longer period of time. But smoke inhalation can kill you in minutes, if not seconds, so in this context, it really doesn't matter. Ohain was killed, and according to the Journal, quote, in a recent interview, Rossiter said he believes that von Ohain was using full self-driving, which, if true, would make his death the first known fatality involving Tesla's most advanced driver assistance technology. First red flag. Scroll way down into the story and you read, quote, von Ohain and Rossiter had been drinking, and an autopsy found that von Ohain died with a blood alcohol level of 0.26, more than 3 times the legal limit, a level of intoxication that would have hampered his ability to maintain control of the car, experts said. And it just might have also affected Rossiter's perception of the situation, right? But right after that, they say, quote, automakers race toward the promise of a driverless future. For private vehicles, that day is far from here. But critics say features like full self-driving already are giving drivers a false sense of confidence about taking their eyes off the road or getting behind the wheel after drinking, evincing the dangers of letting consumers test an evolving experimental technology on the open road. Remember that, to them, you are stupid, useless, dangerous, and can't be trusted. Sums up the news media's attitude towards us perfectly. You have to scroll down even further to read that Tesla has multiple warnings, including on installation and when it's activated, that FSD is not intended for full self-driving autonomy, and the driver still has to maintain control of the vehicle and stop it from causing accidents or violating traffic laws. Before they got to that part, they just had to exploit Ohain's widow, Nora Bass, who said, quote, regardless of how drunk Hans was, Musk has claimed that this car can drive itself and is essentially better than a human. We were sold a false sense of security. It takes even further to get to the details showing no brakes were applied and rolling tire marks to show the wheels were being powered. They quoted an idiot patrol sergeant saying that was consistent with FSD, but no, it isn't! Not at all! It's consistent with this fool having his foot to the floor! The rest of the article is peppered with other fear-mongering and restating the false hysteria over the so-called recalls we've covered. Now, you may be saying, Shane, that's all well and good, but isn't it good to be critical of FSD when it fails this way? There's just one teensy tiny little problem with that. The car didn't have full self-driving. Elon Musk tweet-exed. He was not on FSD. The software had unfortunately never been downloaded. I say unfortunately because the accident probably would not have happened if FSD had been engaged. Tesla's policy chief Rohan Patel backed him up, quote, a tragic loss of one of our team members and inaccurate reporting on it years later. Apart from FSD beta software not being downloaded on the car, data from the incident was not retrievable. Notwithstanding the lack of information, as per NHTSA SGO requirements, Tesla reported the incident on the basis of unverified allegations that were made in a vehicle owner questionnaire submitted to the agency. While we disagree with the SGO rules and the confusion they cause as evidenced in this case and others, we follow these reporting rules regardless. Oh, yeah, this accident happened 2 years ago. The journal didn't mention that part. Again, this sort of fear-mongering is incredibly harmful. By every piece of reliable data available, you're safer using FSD than driving yourself. And even just according to logic, you're just as much in control of your Tesla when FSD is on than when it's off. You can override anything it does at any time. So at worst, it'll drive as badly as you do. At best, it'll react before you have a chance to and stop an accident you might not be able to avoid. As I said last time, this just opens the door for people to drive as horribly as they want and just blame the car for the problems they cause. Remember, his blood alcohol level was 0.26. Just 0.15 is associated with major loss of motor control, poor or no balance, severe attention and reaction deficits, and inability to process sounds or visuals, and nausea or vomiting. It's also associated with dangerously impaired judgment and decision-making, especially regarding driving skills. And apparently, it's only about 4% away from severe alcohol poisoning and loss of consciousness. Too bad we don't know Rossiter's blood alcohol level, but I suspect, given that the two were drinking together, it would be similar, which seriously calls into question his memory and perception of events. What's more believable? O'Hain was commode hanging drunk, he had FSD on, and FSD for some reason hit the pedal to the floor and steered him into a tree, when tons of people have posted videos of Tesla using FSD, and it never behaves anything like that. Or, O'Hain was commode hanging drunk and had his foot to the floor, overriding FSD even if it were on and activated. In a car that sounds an alarm if you even begin to drift out of your lane. A drunk guy crashed and died. That's all there is to this story. But since it happened in a Tesla, the news media takes it as an opportunity to go on the attack. Whereas full self-driving and other forms of autonomous driving is the best way to prevent this kind of tragedy from happening in the future. So all of that makes the Wall Street Journal this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And now let's self-attend to this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Dan O'Dowd got biggest Bogon emitter on the February 19, 2023 edition, and we covered his deceptive videos showing Tesla's full self-driving to be unsafe, an experience not shown by any other Tesla owners who tried it. For one of them, O'Dowd paid millions of dollars to have it shown on the Super Bowl. You remember the guy, the owner of Green Hill Software, who says that his software, quote, never fails and can't be hacked, a phrase which receives howls of derisive laughter from any expert. O'Dowd agreed to join a Twitter space for a debate with other Tesla owners to defend his reputation. Big mistake. He only served to destroy what was left of his credibility. There's a lot here, but at least I've saved the long segment for last this time. We got more information about what his beef really is. It turns out O'Dowd didn't like the fact that Tesla rejected his company's operating system and went with Linux. O'Dowd has been a vociferous Linux hater for many years.
I said, you shouldn't use Linux in your car. That's crazy. And he says, I'm the guy who got to the International Space Station with Linux. I said, doesn't it have to run 10 minutes to get there?
What? No! The fastest it's ever taken was a bit over 3 hours, and that was a Russian Soyuz module in a very ideal scenario. The SpaceX missions take just over 20 hours, and that's not including the time it takes for all the preparation that the systems already have to be running for. Besides, there are Linux systems that have measured their uptimes in decades, so I don't know what he's talking about. And apparently, neither does he.
And by the way, rockets are a 2-9 system. They fail about 1 in 100 times your average rocket blows up, whereas your average car has to operate out to about 7 nines before it's even competitive.
Remember him using the nines figures. That'll be important later.
I'm curious where you're getting your statistics from, because
That was only a rough number. I don't know the exact number.
Ah, well, isn't that convenient?
5 nines puts you at about 1 every 165,000, which is roughly how often an accident occurs by human drivers.
No, you're that what you just said is nonsense. Let me get into it. 5 nines, I believe, is 5 minutes a year is the failure
That's for server. That's for servers, right? So people aren't driving 24/7.
So old Danny boy doesn't know you figure accident statistics by miles driven, not time.
How would you like to normalize it so we can speak in math here?
Well, I don't deal in nines.
But then I don't think you should quote it, right?
Took the words right out of my mouth, Meta. And he says that several times throughout the debate.
Like I said, it was just, I don't deal in nines. I mean, really, we don't do nines here.
And, spoiler alert, you'll hear it again. Okay, so let's get to his safety claims.
Elon said the data is unequivocal that supervised full self-driving is 4 times safer than a human driving alone. That is false. That is completely false. It is outrageously false. Everybody who gets in the car with me, I ask them that question. Is this thing 4 times safer than human? They say, no, it's not. In fact, they say it's way worse than your average beginning driver.
Yeah, well, maybe everybody who gets in the car with me isn't a very scientific or reproducible selection criteria.
Can you help me understand why Elon's statement is false? Because he's not talking about the software alone. He's talking when it's combined with human.
I understand that. I understand the distinction. It is a pretty pathetic distinction given that supervised FSD is bullshit and nobody wants it, but fine. We can talk about this useless product, but is it safer? No.
Would you say...
We did a test. We did our own tests.
Yeah, we saw your tests, O'Dowd. Meta 4 pointed out the issue.
But if you remove the human and AEB, and you only look at AEB on its own, it's obviously a terrible system, just like better braking would be, or other things along those lines. So it's a strange comparison to say, let's look at humans plus AEB, and AEB is good, but let's not look at humans plus FSD, and FSD is good.
O'Dowd went on speaking for over 2 minutes without actually answering the question.
If you're paying attention, though, and you're actually holding the wheel ready to make a movement, like you should be according to what their terms and service say, then it's instant. Well, I mean, yeah, well, blame the person, though, not the software.
No, nobody keeps their hands on the wheel. Have you seen, I mean, Omar never has his hands on the wheel. We never have our hands on the wheel. Jillian never has her hands on the wheel. Chuck Cook never puts his hands on the wheel. Nobody puts their hands on the wheel. It's designed to be full self-driving. You don't have your hands on the wheel. I've tried to drive with the hands on the wheel. You can't. If you have your hands on the wheel and you're there and you move it, you disengage right there.
That self-same Omar of Holmar's catalog was there to prove him wrong.
Well, first off, obviously you are driving the car. You get into the car as a human driver. You choose to turn it on when you want it. You turn it off when you don't want it. You rest your hands on the wheel. If you're making a video, that might be one thing. You want to show people that it's driving. But normally I always just rest my hand on the wheel. You're fully in control. This is a supervised ADAS system, just like your company sells. And I want to point out the irony that Dan O'Dowd
I wasn't allowed to answer that question because you stopped my subject. You've brought it up again. You haven't finished the last subject.
Dan, hold on. I'm trying to make a point here.
One after another. Come on, everyone, let's calm down.
I just want to point out the irony that Dan was driving in a Tesla Model 3, and he had the forward collision warning go off to help him prevent a crash. FSD and the work they're doing helped stop him from getting in a crash. And he doesn't realize that this multi-million-dollar ad campaign he's spending against FSD is hurting people.
That is false in every way. You do not have your hand on the wheel. You do not have your hand on the brake, your foot on the brake. You do not have your foot on the accelerator, and the car is driving. That is driving itself, not you. The human is supervising the software driving the car. That's what's going on. And you keep saying it's you. And Tesla says it's you for legal reasons so they don't get sued. But the product itself jerks the wheel with no warning when you have a fraction of a second to save your life.
Okay.
And I don't want that in my car, and neither do all the people who bought it. They're not using it.
The buck stops. The buck stops with the person sitting in the driver's seat. So this is supervised FSD. Yes, it does. This is supervised FSD. People are encouraged. They have to keep their hands on the wheel, eyes on the road. And if the software does a mistake, humans must take over and prevent that.
I'm only trying to make sure that that's not true.
You're disputing facts here, man.
What?
You're disputing the facts here. This is a fact.
No, I'm not. I'm not. I am working very hard to make it be Tesla's fault for shipping a product that is not manageable by ordinary human beings.
And yeah, that's pretty indicative of how the conversation went whenever O'Dowd was challenged. And regarding O'Dowd's idiotic claim we've covered before that he can write software that, quote, never fails and can't be hacked.
If you have a life-saving, human-advancing technology to write completely bug-free software, why would you keep that to yourself versus actually advance humanity forward? I feel like what you're doing is you're saying every engineer, Demis Hassibis, Ilya Sutskever, every single engineer who's well-meaning is an idiot, and you're the only person who knows how to make software.
Well, that's a stupid statement. You make software, and so does those other guys. So that's a dumb statement. So let's try another one.
Yeah, he never wants to back up that claim.
If you're not an expert, how are we going to have a founded engineering discussion? It's all going to be anecdotes and hearsay.
I don't do anecdotes.
Yeah, you do, Dan. We just played it. In fact, all of your videos and ads about Tesla FSD are just unverified, unreproducible anecdotes.
It doesn't need to be supervised. Waymo didn't do it that way. Waymo didn't put something on the road until they had tested it thoroughly, both in simulation and, as I do, by writing tests, by building tests.
This is wrong. They do actually have supervision.
Fact check here, Dan. Even in their most recent safety report, they reported 20 accidents in the first 1 million driverless miles without a driver behind the wheel. And the first one was severe. Nobody died, but somebody hit the car from behind. You can't have zero. You're making a lot of statements. You've stated you're not an engineer. I believe you've also stated you're not a lawyer.
No.
I would ask as an engineer.
I am an engineer. I have a degree in engineering, and it's what I've done for the last 40, 50 years.
But you can't speak about nines? What kind of engineer doesn't speak about safety in terms of probabilities?
The ones who build things that don't fail.
In law, there's a phrase, res ipsa loquitur, the thing speaks for itself. I'm going to offer a new Latin phrase, stultus ipse loquitur, the idiot speaks for himself.
We can look at statistics from NHTSA. In the most recent year, they said 1.35 fatalities per 100 million miles traveled on average. Those are the statistics we have. Now, FSD has driven 1.4 billion miles. If we just sort of multiply that out, it suggests that 19 people should have died traveling 1.4 billion miles. I think the data NHTSA has suggests that there was one fatality where somebody was using FSD beta. And that doesn't even necessarily mean the system was responsible. So you're essentially advocating for killing 19 people in my mind. You've spent millions of dollars for this. And when you look at the fact that FSD is now driving 1 billion miles every 60 days, this would essentially lead to an extra 5 to 7 fatalities every month, I think. So this is really the core of the issue and why I think what you're doing is so reprehensible. I mean, you're spending millions of dollars of your money that could go towards so many things, feeding kids, educating people, and you're spending millions of dollars to advocate for basically banning seatbelts, trying to kill people. It's just so absurd.
Dan, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, That's all false. The whole thing is baloney. It is not.
So then
safer.
Where are the 19 people
Wait a
that
minute.
are dead?
Nobody, he gets to talk for like 3 minutes and insult me the whole time, call me a killer and a murderer, and you cut me off after 30 seconds. Boy, this is really a great debate here, you know.
When did we call you a killer? When did we call you a murderer?
Like I said, stultus ipse loquitur. You see the kind of person O'Dowd is.
Why don't you build your own thing, ship it out there, and show us how much better it is, as opposed to wasting, say, tens of millions of dollars on advertisements trying to disprove another person's product without ever making one?
You mean me developing a full self-driving car system?
Yes. If you think you know better, then I dare you to do so.
Well, no, like Google has literally spent 15 years and I don't know, 20, 30 billion dollars. Elon said he's spending 10 billion this year. I don't have that kind of money. I can't do that.
Then perhaps it is obvious that your systems in certain cars are becoming obsolete. Could this also be the reason why you are so heavily opposed to Tesla software?
No, there's no chance this software is ever going to be in self-driving. There's no chance.
Oh, did he touch a nerve there, Dan?
As you're approaching better and better safety, that area under the curve where you're denying the use of the vehicle with FSD, those deaths are someone's responsibility. Engineering is about trade-offs. Engineering is not about 100%.
Well, I disagree with your premise. The more you keep FSD off the road, the less people die.
That's not what the data shows. If you want
have no data to prove that. You have nothing.
If we're talking about fatalities, there are hard facts. If you want to discuss,
he clearly doesn't want the hard facts, Meta.
You've taken an oath. If you're an engineer, you took the oath of the engineer. I encourage you to reread it. In there, it has a lot of statements that would go to the effect of, don't make statements you don't know about.
I didn't. I said nothing about any of those. You brought up AI. I didn't.
FSD is an AI system. And you're talking about testing an AI system.
Yeah, I'm testing to see whether it kills people, and the answer is it tries.
You can't test an AI system like it's a heuristic system. You're using the wrong methodology. It's like trying to throw water on a chemical fire. You're using the wrong method.
So I'm supposed to let it run over little children because it's stupid.
Okay, let's get to where Adrian, the host, challenges O'Dowd on one of the videos we covered, the Super Bowl commercial where FSD runs over a child mannequin. This is his chance to set the record straight.
In that video, though it was very low resolution, so it's very difficult to tell this, but you can actually still tell. You can see a small little icon at the bottom with a little warning triangle there. And this is exactly what you would see if you were to say, hold down the accelerator pedal, even though you have FSD engaged. The person who is testing this thing in the video held down the accelerator pedal. And what's even more interesting enough is this specific road had a bunch of cones on it, which essentially limited the FSD in its decision-making ability to, say, swerve off to the side. It's not going to swerve into a bunch of cones. It literally is not going to do that. So you caged it, essentially, held down the accelerator pedal, and let it run over a mannequin, and are using this as a test. You're making this exceedingly difficult to actually see, especially when it comes to seeing this little icon on the screen, because you uploaded it in such a poor resolution that this is either malice or you just have an incompetent media team.
No, that is false and actually libelous.
How?
It is not true. It's absolutely not true. The accelerator pedal was not pushed. I have affidavits to that behavior, just in case some idiot said that. There is no indication that the pedal was not pushed, and there's nothing to indicate that it was. You are just making that up.
Can we have like the HD version of this video? Can you release the HD version?
That video is just taken by somebody in the back seat with a handheld camera.
That is very convenient, isn't it?
No, that's just because there was somebody in the back seat with a handheld camera.
Well, those cameras are still high def. Your commercial aired and was uploaded to YouTube at 540p.
There's no obligation that we had anybody.
So a Super Bowl ad that you spend millions of dollars on was filmed by a random person in the back with a handheld camera in low resolution.
And he just continued evading and lying and not actually answering any questions for the full 100 minutes. Sometimes I'm stuck for commentary because the idiocy is just so obvious there's nothing to say other than my new phrase, stultus ipse loquitur. made specifically because of Dan O'Dowd, and that means he must be this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Back in February, we gave Judge Kathleen McCormick biggest Bogon emitter for her extremely corrupt court decision against Elon Musk. Tesla stockholders just sent her an even bigger middle finger. In 2018, stockholders agreed to pay Musk a certain amount for each milestone he hit. Even though each one seemed like an impossible task on its own, he hit every single one, and that entitled him to a compensation package worth $56 billion. One person who insisted on remaining anonymous bought a grand total of 5 shares of Tesla stock and sued. The judge ruled that the pay package was excessive, wasn't appropriately set by the board, and was too confusing for the dumb stockholders to understand. People, she said, were, quote, starry-eyed by Musk's superstar appeal. She struck it down, meaning that she believes that, in the last 6 years, Elon must be forced to have worked for Tesla for free. By the way, the only reason the package was as big as it was, being mainly comprised of Tesla stock, was that he had gotten the stock price so high and the market cap upwards of $1 trillion. Although it's come down a bit since then, it's still an order of magnitude above where it was. And that stock coming down a bit in these last 2 bear market years actually makes the package worth more like $44.9 billion. So at least he made back what he sunk on Twitter. Musk had responded on X-Twitter, "Never incorporate your company in the state of Delaware." He followed that up with a poll asking whether or not Tesla should disincorporate in Delaware and reincorporate in Texas. The vote was overwhelmingly positive, so Musk said that the issue would be brought before the stockholders. This was done, along with a vote to ratify Musk's 2018 performance-based stock options. Here's what it sounded like.
Fourth, our stockholders have approved the redomestication of Tesla from Delaware to Texas. Fifth and finally, our stockholders have approved the ratification of the 100% performance-based stock option award to Elon Musk that was approved by stockholders in 2018.
And then it was time for Elon to come out. If you're thinking of stockholder meetings as boring events full of stuffed shirts droning on about finances, well, that wasn't this one at least. Elon came out like a rock star, dancing and waving his hands in the air as the stockholders gave him a standing ovation. Here's what it sounded like.
Hey guys. Welcome to the Tesla shareholder meeting. And I just want to start off by saying, hot damn, I love you guys. Yeah.
If anyone thought that Elon had somehow snowed angry shareholders into taking their money, which included most of the news media, well, this meeting, live streamed to the world and viewed by more than 1 million people, proved that they were sorely mistaken. The shareholder vote isn't binding on the court, but it'll make it a lot easier for Musk when the case is appealed. It's the stockholders saying, no, we weren't snowed, we made a fully informed decision, and even if you want to claim we didn't back then, we certainly made it now. If McCormick is as corrupt and Biden-bought as I think she is, she'll dig in her heels. But it'll be a different matter when it's appealed to the state Supreme Court. That could still tie things up for months, but Elon doesn't seem that concerned. Here's his answer to one investor in the Q&A that followed his talk.
After $56 billion, you can afford to probably take your kids to Disneyland now. Is that where you're going?
Well, I mean, by the way, it is worth emphasizing that it's Tesla stock that I have to own for 5 years. So, you know, it's not possible to, it's not actually cash, and I can't cut and run, nor would I want to.
A couple more notes about the meeting before we close off this segment. For those of you who are worried about Elon laying off the entire supercharger team. So, our supercharger network is continuing to grow. Rumors of the death of the supercharger are greatly exaggerated. We are, in fact, continuing to grow the supercharger network significantly. In fact, this year, I think we'll deploy more superchargers this year that are actually working than the rest of industry combined. Just FYI. So now we are going to be more careful about the capital efficiency of where we deploy superchargers. But for sure, any place that has congestion, any sort of missing parts of the map that we're missing, we're going to put the superchargers there. So even for the remainder of the year, we expect to spend about $500 million on supercharger deployment. So it's very significant, and it'd be a well-spent $500 million. And one brickbat to a bunch of dumb astroturfing investors who apparently bought stock just to push their pseudoscience. They pushed forward a proposal saying, a stockholder proposal regarding reporting on effects and risks associated with electromagnetic radiation and wireless technologies. Geez, what's next? Reporting the risks associated with chemtrails and Bigfoot droppings? Here's just some highlights from their comments defending it, and notice the names of the usual suspects. This is Deborah Davis, founding director of the Board on Environmental Studies and Toxicology.
I'm also speaking on behalf of millions of young children, infants, and toddlers.
Oh, won't someone think of the children?
And pregnant women who are more vulnerable to wireless radiation, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Oh, I can't even, and this segment's going long. Just check the channel.
The World Health Organization has concluded that both low levels of EMF and microwave or cellular radiation are, quote, possible carcinogens, the same category as some pesticides and gasoline.
Yeah, and so is drinking from glassware, nickels, and being tall. And remember, they have 0 items listed as not being carcinogenic.
The companies that provide secondary insurance, like Lloyd's of London and Swiss Re, have long considered electromagnetic fields to be uninsurable, comparable to asbestos, due to potential health and environmental damages.
No, it's due to cybersecurity concerns. See how they keep recycling all the old lies? Okay, enough of that other than to say the stockholders voted it down. Good for them. Looks like the company is in safe hands, in my opinion.